You're tuning in to the Bueno Power Hour podcast. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Bueno Power Hour podcast. I am your host, Arthur Bueno, and I got another special guest here, Joy Celine Asto. She is a photographer currently residing in Manila, Philippines. Kind of wanted to sort of just give a little bit of background. I'm not so sure when I found Joy. I may have been in the Lomography websites. I found out that she is actually one of the editors of the infamous The Photographer. I actually contributed to that website a while back because there was actually an editor who went into the Reddit analog forum, the subreddit, and had asked about photography, and I showed them my Moments in the Same Place project there. It was all street photography in San Francisco, California. She's under the moniker The Caffeinated, which I think is pretty cool as her Instagram name. And also is part of the What a Roll magazine as well. Did I mention that she is a Filipina who shoots analog film, which is way awesome. And that's pretty much it. Joy, welcome to the podcast. How you doing today?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm doing great as it can be.
So, so right now I had when I had found you, because I'm assuming it's going to be me who had found you. Um, I think that I was really, first of all, I was focused on the fact that you were a film photographer and you were also Filipino. I'm Filipino as well, and coming from a person from the States who tries to showcase Filipino artists, especially even in women who are actually thrown out there in the Philippines. You know what I'm saying? I try to do as best I can is to sort of discover these folks and sort of showcase, their work and kind of like, just, put you in the spotlight and such. When I discovered you, I had, seen a couple of projects that were really shown showed a lot of character and a lot of your personality. The Neon Project was one of them when you used the Cinestill 800 film. Gorgeous lighting, good choice of subject, and just being able to kind of chase that atmosphere. And I think it's called the Photo Project. I totally butchered that one. It's the black and white project that you did. I think it was like the diaries portion of your portfolio. It was all in black and white, and I saw that being such a dark sort of angle as to how you sort of receive the subject matter that you had, captured in those photographs. You mainly shoot all film. It seems as though that you're shooting with either a Canon or a Nikon FE2. Let's actually just start from jump. What got you started in this mess? And I see that you continue to sort of pursue it. Well, what kind of influenced you to start becoming a photographer rather just start making photographs?
I think when I first got, and it was actually a reintroduction to film since my our generation or my generation,
Mm-hmm.
we grew up with film cameras, so I wasn't a stranger to it. I knew how to load stuff, but just to make things different for me, because I was used to 35 film,
Mm-hmm.
I started out with medium format.
Oh,
I
okay.
got myself a Holga, which was totally alien to me
Mm-hmm.
that time. It was around 10 years ago, I think,
Wow.
when I got one.
Mm.
So I started with that, and I think I found it all started with lomography for me,
Okay.
as with the other people. I found out about lomography through a forum, which was totally not related to photography. It was just the person sharing his personal stuff, like what he's doing on the side.
Mm-hmm.
So I gave it a go. I found some local sellers of Olga and Diana cameras. So I got it was a hard choice between Diana and Holga, but I decided to go for a Holga. And then from there, I started getting 35 cameras.
Mm-hmm.
Strangely,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't that I didn't enjoy shooting with medium format film that time. It was more 35 was more available to me. So
Oh,
I
okay.
decided it, yeah, because I couldn't find all the family cameras for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
My mom hid them really well. So yeah, so I had to find some 35 cameras for myself, and that's how I ended up with a Nikon FE2, which I still have to this day.
Right, right,
It
right.
still works, everything's still great. I just like send it out for maintenance once in a while. So
Okay.
after that, I got the rest of the cameras that I had. I started getting them one by one. Like
Mm-hmm.
I got the Yashica Electro 35 next, and a couple of point and shoots,
Mm-hmm.
and Red 3, and from there it was a slippery slope.
Mm-hmm.
After I started getting 35 cameras, I started wondering, what can I do with this?
Mm-hmm.
So natural inclination for film photographers for some reason is of course to shoot daily life.
Mm-hmm.
And for me that included street.
Mm.
So some of my early attempts at doing good film photography was with street photography.
Right.
And yeah, and around that time the Japanese film photography what do you call this, the very well known ones,
You're talking
they
about
start,
Daido Moriyama and such?
yeah,
Mm.
yes, and I think there was one, I forgot her name, but she is she uses point and shoot cameras like the Konica Big Mini,
Mm-hmm.
and she shoots daily life. So it was kind of called, if I'm not mistaken, slice of life photography. So you
Yeah.
just document whatever is happening to you on a daily basis. If you come across something interesting, you shoot with whatever you have, and typically that was a point and shoot for many Japanese photographers.
Mm-hmm.
So I started discovering things like that bit by bit. But around that time, I also started working for Lomography, writing under the Lomography magazine. So I was heavily influenced by the community members. So
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at pictures, at uploads on a daily basis, featuring them, inviting some for interviews, and writing about them. So I was heavily influenced. I started being heavily influenced by both street and experimental film photography, like double exposures,
Mm-hmm.
cross processing. So a lot of very colorful stuff back then.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started gradually gravitating towards portrait photography around maybe 4 or 5 years after I started.
Mm-hmm.
And I do more portraits now, but occasionally, whenever the need and the mood strikes, I still do a little bit of street and slice of life photography. So that's how it all started.
Well, that's a pretty good introduction. I definitely feel that. Um, so as far as that's concerned, I mean, because you said that in our generation, um, I think I was reading on your bio that you were born in 1986, correct?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So I'm born in 1985, and I kind of understand where you're coming from in the aspects of, you know, I guess what it is for us is that film photography has more of an honest approach rather than shooting with digital, right?
Yeah.
Um, and because it's basically you basically see what you get almost with film. I mean, there's maybe a little bit of manipulation here and there. Um, But was there any desire to even go into digital photography by any chance, or were you just kind of like, I mean, I'm just gonna stick with this medium for as long as I live?
I think, of course, to some extent, I have, because growing up in an increasingly digital world,
Mm-hmm.
I understood that there was no other way for but for digital photography to become mainstream, to become the common way to take photos, because film photos, compared to digital at that time, when I was starting, I think um digital point and shoots were very popular for
Mm-hmm.
amateur photographers. So
Mm-hmm.
I understood that it was going to be the normal for people.
Mm-hmm.
But I also felt that I wasn't ready for a DSLR yet.
Mm-hmm.
Strangely,
Right, right, right.
strangely, I didn't feel that I had the technical knowledge to handle such like complicated tool for me that time. So I wanted to start from the beginning, like start from the basics, get a feel of what it's like to hold a camera that's not point and shoot, that's
Mm-hmm.
not what do you call this? Those like beginner DSLRs, like the
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, consumer
hybrid
grade.
camera.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I knew that professional DSLRs, if I wanted to pursue photography professionally, I would have to be used to operating and shooting with it. But I
Mm-hmm.
felt that it was too big of a jump for me, starting with digital cameras, like point and shoot cameras, to uh, DSLRs. So I
Mm-hmm.
felt that I should have like a reintroduction with film, because it was the basic. It was how it all began for many professional photographers back then. I did some research, and um, around the time, professional photographers have just started moving all their equipment from completely film slowly, and then eventually they've gone off full digital.
Mm-hmm.
There were
Mm-hmm.
only a few people who were pursuing film photography professionally, mostly with medium format.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I felt that starting with film would give me the discipline to
Mm-hmm.
like find out right away what I want first, like
Mm-hmm.
get a feel of what it is like to handle an actual camera, and then being constrained to some degree, because it will I felt that it would teach me not to be trigger happy when it comes to cameras, because digital cameras offer you unlimited possibilities,
Mm-hmm.
even way back then.
Mm-hmm.
So I still understand that there's no there's no way for most professional photography to do their work than with the digital camera, because the turnaround is important, and
Mm-hmm.
be able to like perfect every shot is important, to be able to deliver everything flawlessly. And film admittedly doesn't do perfect. It's never perfect.
Mm-hmm.
On rare occasions maybe, but it's debatable. So I understand all of that, and one day I still hope I'll be able to do professional photography to some degree
Okay.
with a digital camera. So yeah.
Okay, so you're basically kind of just doing it out of, I mean, it's not necessarily a hobby for you, really. It's just sort of a part of you. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, it's a tool that I use. It's what I have at the moment.
Oh, okay. All
And
right.
once I have a digital camera, I don't think I'm going to give up on my film cameras
Okay.
anyway. So it's just I think of a camera as a tool, whatever it is, whether it's my smartphone camera,
Mm.
whether it's a point and shoot, whether it's a medium format like
Right,
a
right,
professional
right.
medium format camera. I think of it as a way to create.
Mm. So what I'm kind of wondering, because I think you're the first Filipina woman who I have gotten contact with in the Philippines, who is a photographer, who's an artist. So, for my understanding, there has been quite a bit of a, well, at this point, I mean, like, of course, of the pandemic and such, but I noticed that there have been quite a few Filipino folks who have been shooting film. There was actually a Filipino photographer. I don't know if you know who he is. He's Angelo Guillen de Mesa. He is a photographer who I think he runs, I think, a couple of zine clubs there, like thousand PH zine, I think. Um, but anyway, I kind of was curious as to how are you developing all this film in the Philippines? Because I mean, many labs at the time had decided to shut down their development, machines and just went all digital, just to do print. Locally, since you're in Manila, is there a lot of services of that for film photography at all?
Um, in terms of labs, there's like a couple here in Manila that I know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when it comes to printing, darkroom printing, I think only a handful, and some of them are even like individuals just offering printing service, their darkroom printing services,
Mm-hmm.
not really companies. So, um, in terms of like big resources when it comes to film photography,
Mm-hmm.
there are still a handful of them. There will still be labs that will develop your film, will print your negatives, but I wouldn't consider it as big as the US market at the moment. Yeah. So I can't, let's say I'm in Manila, but I can't really go to a province in Visayas to to have my films developed. I still
uh,
take it here. So it's not that big
okay.
here in Philippines. In Manila you can get by, but um other stuff like printing, let's say, what do you call that? The
Like,
drugstore printing things.
yeah.
We Fujifilm outlets here do print negatives and digital pictures as well. So
Okay.
as long as you're here in Metro Manila, you have ways to get your film photography stuff done.
Okay. So I see. Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that because this is kind of a thing I've been really curious about. Well, how popular right now is film photography in the Philippines? Have you been able to kind of find a collective of folks to sort of join up and talk shop, or have they been kind of few and far between? Because again, as a Filipino American, as an Asian American, I don't really know what's going on in the Philippines, artist wise. I can only see from, like, online and such, and just kind of hearing from friends who have sort of connections with those folks there. Um, has it been a pretty evolving community over there, if I'm understanding, or has it just been sort of just like you can only find a couple of folks here and there in the Philippines that are actually down to doing this kind of stuff?
Actually, I think you'd be surprised. Film is very much alive here. I'm
Okay.
part of maybe four collectives, two of them into zine making. So I'm one of the locals that do a lot of photo zines on the side.
Mm-hmm.
So we attend zine fairs. Aside from we do photo walks with each other. We do photographer features. We also, surprisingly, we have because we have local film distributors from like Kodak, Ilford. Sometimes they partner with
Mm.
groups like ours to sponsor a shoot, sponsor a photo walk, like some labs sponsor free,
Mm-hmm.
developing if you win a contest and stuff like that. So it's been very, because I've been active in the local film community since 10 years ago. I've always wanted to look for people who will shoot film with me.
Mm.
So I've been just on the sidelines looking for any developments, checking if there are any new groups, and eventually I found one, and then I started joining new ones in the recent years. It's been surprising how many young people are so interested in it that they actively join groups. Some of them started from Lomo, Manila. We had a very popular and very um busy, very alive community back in the days
Mm-hmm.
from Lomo, Manila, even in the early years of Facebook. And then small groups started to just sprout off of that. So
Mm.
some started doing small film photography projects, and they um, maintained it as a small group, and then some started their own. Some of them I joined, some of them I co-founded. One
Mm.
of them most recently is a group called We Want Film. Yeah, so I'm part of that. I'm that's the group I'm most active in, and I see more and more people getting interested in specific cameras. Let's say point and shoots. Like some of them want big mini, some of them even surprisingly want the Contax T2, and I'm like, no way you're gonna get that here. And it's insanely expensive. It's not even human price anymore.
Right, right.
So yeah, I've seen people get interested in films like Cinestill, um, specifically films like um, double films.
Mm.
I don't know if you like the double exposed ones.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them also want pure black and white film, but only either Tri-X or Kodak. Kodak Tri-X or Ilford FP
Mm-hmm.
films.
Mm-hmm.
Very specific. They don't really want other black and white films. So it's been interesting to see how um, the community here, the film community here, is not only alive but also thriving. I see people getting interested in joining other film photography groups that are international and not just local based.
Mm-hmm.
I see them um, make film only Instagram accounts like mine. So it's been very encouraging
Mm.
to tell you and to be part of a film community that is still very much alive.
Well, I'm proud of you, man. I'm definitely proud of you because it actually makes me feel very. It makes me feel good for the fact that and for me as a Filipino, there's not a lot of praise with Filipino artists, um, especially in photography. We don't really have, in what I've seen, over the years in my, I guess, career in photography. I haven't seen Filipinos who have showed any kind of innovation in or have been spotlighted to have any kind of historical photographs we've taken. It was more obviously American, British, Australian, Japanese, Chinese folks who go on locations or kind of just show this kind of art. You know what I mean? Um, it's really encouraging to kind of see that and to kind of hear about that, and that's probably why I wanted to follow you and talk to you about these kinds of things, because you're talking to a person who is actually really isolated, who doesn't really know what's going on with the art world these days. I kind of just go solo, photographing slice of life as much as you guys do, you know what I mean? Which kind of sort of just puts me into this, question here. So, stylistically, I know that you were doing street photography stuff, and then you're kind of gearing more to slice of life and portraiture. But is there something specifically you have in mind when you take these photographs? Is there something in your head that you start to sort of develop as you're taking these pictures, or are you sort of just like in the moment, kind of just seeing things and photographing?
I think it depends on what I'm shooting. For
Mm-hmm.
example, with portraits, I don't really like um post, and I'm very editorial as pictures that just don't tell you a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
So I tend to gravitate more towards emotive portrait photography. So it
Mm-hmm.
has to convey a feeling, a mood, or a message or story. So in when it comes to things like that, I have to think of what I want to shoot, like plan it very carefully. Like, do I need wardrobe? Do I need props? What kind of film do I want to shoot with? Where do I want to shoot? Who do I want to involve in this project? So things like that. What story do I want to portray um with my with my shoot? So sometimes if let's say I just want to test the camera and I don't want to do the usual, like take random photos of things in my house.
Mm-hmm.
I if I feel like shooting with someone just to test the camera, it would be less planned,
Mm-hmm.
but I still probably would try to get some emotion in the shots.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not as fleshed out, maybe not as what do you call it? There's not a lot of props or wardrobe involved, or
Right.
it can be a location that doesn't look too crowded, doesn't look too cluttered, good enough for like headshots. But
Mm-hmm.
still I can find myself working in creatively. So it's like that for mostly like that for portraits. But for slice of life, for street, that's why I shoot very slow when it comes to um things like that, because it depends on how I feel at the moment. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I may be walking down the street and I see something interesting or funny or strange. I take a picture of it, but it doesn't happen every day. So it
Mm-hmm.
takes me a long time to really finish a roll if I do that. Unlike with portraits that I can like burn through a roll in one shoot. But with street photography and slice of life, it's more I let life happen and
Mm-hmm.
things happen in front of me, and if I find them interesting, I take photos of them. If not, I just save it for another day. I don't really like forcing myself to like burn through a roll just so I have pictures.
So you don't shoot every day specifically, is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, I don't.
Okay.
I
All right.
shoot when the mood. I think it depends. It's more about me. Um, Aside from finding the mood, it's more about finding the time to shoot, because sometimes you're just so out of creative juices, so out of creative energy that even if you want to shoot every day, it just doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I just let myself be productive as much as possible when the mood strikes me, at least when it comes to shooting with film, because
Mm-hmm.
I treat every frame as a valuable resource.
Right. Okay.
I don't really like wasting frames. So in that way, I have to be very specific about the things that I shoot, and if I really am in the mood to shoot, so I don't waste it.
So,
It's a very slow process, actually.
well, that's good. I mean, at least you're taking your time. So, what are your favorite subjects to photograph? I mean, yeah, I mean, it could be. Is there a specific thing that you usually look for when you're photographing, like at certain times, or is there like a thing that repeats quite a bit in your photographs that you're seeing?
Well, I do have what you would consider a muse. I shoot with her more often than the others.
Mm-hmm.
We started out 4 years ago, I think, if I'm not. mistaken, some years ago, we started out shooting with each other, and then eventually, um, she became a mainstay in my roster of models or
Okay.
subjects to photograph. I like working with her because she was who I started with.
Mm,
So we were both she was new to being photographed as a model when we started out, and I was new to shooting portraits more
mm,
decisively at that
mm-hmm.
time that we started. So we kind of have a shared experience, and we trust each other a lot because of that. So sometimes when I have um, a, a theme or a project in mind, she's one of the first people um, to end up on my to contact list. And if she's available, I go ahead. If if not, I find other people. But if you take a look at all my portrait series, she's always there. She's like in 50% or 75% of the projects that I've got on my website. So if when it comes to subjects, I would say that she is. But when it comes to themes, I don't really have any specific themes that I gravitate towards in the moment at the moment. It's just for me more what is the mood or what is the story that I want to photograph. So
Okay.
if it's a characteristic of a photo, you can say that maybe I capture more emotions than anything.
Okay. So you definitely try to sort of like create some sort of narrative with almost every frame that you make. Well, does
Yeah.
that kind of is that influenced by anybody, a specific artist that you follow these days, or is it something that you kind of like developed yourself?
It comes from a lot of influences actually.
Mm.
Um, Mostly with contemporary photographers, film photographers that I have become friends with. They they have this abilities to integrate a story or an emotion into portrait photography.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to do the same, but of course I understand that not all like I cannot replicate a certain mood that I see from a photo.
Mm-hmm.
It there are many variables to creating a photo that has a certain mood. So I just work with what I have. So I may be influenced by them, but I would say that the sentiments and the mood is purely mine. I work with what I feel at the moment or
Mm-hmm.
what I've been thinking about at the moment. Like
Mm-hmm.
when I shot the Neon series, I was very much into um colors at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and Cinestill was becoming very increasingly popular. So I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to try it out, and I saw some samples that um people have shot in nighttime shoots, but in city locations, like very busy locations. And I wanted to try it out myself, but I didn't want to do just plain street shots or lights and stuff. So I wanted to work with the model that I was talking to you about. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to work with her to see if I can like capture an emotion despite all the busyness in the background. So it's a mix. So my influence is a mix of a lot of things, and a lot of it is dependent on how photographers I follow incorporate mood and emotion into their shot, how they build stories even in a single frame. So I cannot really name a specific photographer because there are so many of them, and sometimes it's just I like this picture of a photographer, but I haven't seen a lot of his works or her works to be able to understand his or her style that much. It's just I it's so happy that I like this.
Mm-hmm.
And since I've been writing about photographers for as long as I can remember, maybe 10 years now,
Mm-hmm.
All of them, I consider all of the stuff that I've seen, that I've written about, as part of what have influenced me, at least creatively, or how I build ideas and how I build on themes. So it's hard to pinpoint exactly, oh, this is my main influence. It's
Mm.
just a mix of a lot.
Wow. Man. Well, so as far as that's concerned, I mean, like, is there a specific film that you favor the most at these days, or because I know that your palette is geared towards color, and I noticed that that's kind of your niche for a lot of the shoots that you do. What's your go-to film that you usually use these days?
These days, I shoot mostly with cheap films like Kodak Gold, called Kodak Color Plus 200, and maybe when I have the budget for it, I go for slightly more pricey films like Portra, Ektar. So I just cycle through whatever I have. But sometimes if I have very unique films like the Lomochrome Purple,
Mm-hmm.
because you have to, for me at least, you have to shoot in very specific locations and very specific subjects for that. So I if the location calls for it, I go for that. But mostly it's what I have, which is Kodak Gold,
Mm-hmm.
Kodak Color Plus, and some Portra. So,
Mm-hmm.
but many of the photos that I've shot recently, or at least what I have in my on my website, they're a mix of Portra and Kodak Color Plus, if I'm not mistaken. So many of these are also cheap expired films. So I have a stock of expired films. So sometimes they've been reloaded and I don't really know exactly what film is inside. So I just shoot with it and I assume that, oh, it looks like Kodak Gold, so I'm gonna call it Kodak Gold. I'm gonna It's in a Kodak Gold canister, most likely it is, and it has no label. And I've forgotten who I bought it from and what film he was selling. So let's just assume that it's Kodak
Oh
because it's
wow.
the one of the most common film stocks here.
So that's kind of what I shoot with these days because my favorite, film was I think it was discontinued was Fuji Superia. I've
Oh
always been
yeah,
yeah, it's my favorite. That and um Agfa Vista film, the 400. I love that
yeah,
film, yeah, because I loved like a lot of the warm tones it gets out of it.
yeah.
It's been and not only that, like the grain structure on it's really rough. So
Mhm.
yeah, and depending on the kind of like film that you use or the I use a Leica. I'm a Leica M4 user, so I usually shoot with a 35 Voigtlander lens that I yeah it took me a while to get that specific setup. Um, but I really like how that grain structure really shows when you're like scanning the film. Are you doing your own scanning, or are you sending these negatives out for scan?
I send them out to a lab that does developing and scanning. As much as I want to do my own, to develop and scan my own films, I don't really have the space for it yet. So, and I don't think I'm that good at developing. I've had a hand in it. I did try it years back, and I wasn't really confident about my developing skills. So, I still send out my roles to film labs.
I've never been good at developing myself either. I've never done the C41 process. Has always been like black and white, development. But even then, I hated it. I'm not a big fan of it. I've always been the type of person that wants to kind of have somebody develop the film and then I scan it. I guess that's always been
Mhm.
my kind of thing. Um, so that's kind of interesting, and so I'm hearing that a lot of people are the communities of film photography is big there and such. One of the questions I had was, what projects are you currently working on now? I had made my showed my favorites of like some of the projects that you had done. One of them, well, the neon project was one of my favorites because of the color, aspect. The other one was with hair.
Yes.
I like that one quite a bit. I forgot to mention that one. That one was, is that with your muse as well?
Yes.
Okay. So what was sort of the process of that? Was it just because like you kind of saw sort of a sort of a design aspect on that project, or because that's, to tell you the truth, that project is way different from all the projects that you have in your portfolio.
Mm. I think I got the idea. If I remember correctly, I got the idea from um the fact that there are many articles going online about women having body issues,
Mm.
but I haven't heard of people expressing as loudly their frustration with hair. Because I
Mm.
have a very big frustration with my hair. Because I'm a curly girl. I'm a curly girl, curly haired girl, and here in the Philippines, it's not. If you have curly hair, it's not good or something like that. So it's been tamed through the years, the backlash against curly hair, but I still don't feel comfortable with my own hair to some
Mm.
degree.
Mm-hmm.
I've grown to accept it, but it's not. I don't think it's great. So I people have been shooting themes about female body issues like what do you call that? If you're curvy, people think you're too fat or stuff like that. If you're slim, they think you're too thin. So
Yeah.
there's been a lot of, in the recent years. There's been a lot of um movement and interpretation towards body positivity for women.
That's
So
good. That's good.
I didn't want to do the same thing because people have been doing it really well, and I don't really want to do something that was half baked and
Right.
just trying to get into the bandwagon.
Right. Right. Right.
I decided what is my biggest body issue, and
Mm.
turned out to be hair. So I that time I talked to my muse and told her about what I had in mind, and it started out to be an issue in my mind, exploring the issue of curly hair.
Mm.
But of course, the person I was going to work with, I didn't really want her to. I didn't really want to put her into a very strenuous situation where we have to curl her hair, we have to style it, we have to make sure it holds. I wanted a natural and carefree shoot before the ideas run out of my head.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually, while I was shooting, I decided on the spot that we should just shoot with her, but with the focus of anything that has to do with hair, or any kind of imagery, any kind of style, any kind of framing that would put hair into the focus.
Ah. Okay.
So
Okay.
it was more an idea just developing throughout the show.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it feels different because I was really very passionate about it. Not that I wasn't passionate about the others. It's more it was very personal to me, but there wasn't me involved. I mean, I wasn't the model. It wasn't a self-portrait project. It was my interpretation of my own personal issues.
Well,
And
yeah, I kind
yeah,
of sorry to interrupt you on that, but I kind of feel you on that. I mean, it is sort of a self-portraiture project, but with
without me involved,
right, right,
without me
right.
in it.
Yeah. I had an assignment where years ago, because I went to university in San Francisco years ago, and the project was make a portrait without a portrait. And
Oh.
yeah, I did not understand that at all. I didn't understand what he was talking about, and
Mm.
and so I started kind of thinking about it, and I started seeing some examples of people, doing the project, and turns out that it was them taking pictures of random things or specific spaces, and it's like that's who I am. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
why I kind of identify with hair, because I mean, my hair is like bad right now, right? It's terrible. I've also had issues with my hair for a while, um, and I'm having more issues of it because as Filipinos, when you have a gray hair, that's already showing like your age, right?
Yes.
So you know what I mean. So I have my own kind of issues as a Filipino who, and especially here in the States where, you know what I mean, we have this sort of idea of like, we take after that crazy Asian code, whether if it's Filipino, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, we have to sort of like create this sort of artificial like image of ourselves because we want to look young forever, right? We kind of look down upon like people like being the age of 34 or 35, you know what I mean, and not
Yeah.
having, what I'm saying, not having our shit together or whatever. um but yeah, I've always found that when I saw that project, I was really like fascinated by it. It was one of the most it was one of the more unique projects that I kind of came across when I was looking at your portfolio, and sort of just like following you over the years as to what you do as a photographer and such. um I'm just glad that you're actually really showcasing this stuff. So at this point right now, what are you currently working on? Like, what is your major project that you're focusing on these days?
Well, as with many photographers these days, we're limited to shooting at home. So, I joined this film photography project where we shoot with a point and shoot camera, and it's like a lockdown diary kind of thing. So we shoot with what we have, but it needs to have like a date stamp,
Mm,
so you know that it happened in a specific time in history.
mm,
So we made use of the date stamp of point and shoot cameras. A lot of us are shooting with point and shoot cameras to document our like what's happening now in our coronavirus.
mm-hmm,
So I've been doing that since late mid March, I think. But it's been difficult because the things that you shoot are very limited. So it's difficult for me because I feel that I've become too familiar with the place, and nothing really excites me a
mm,
lot.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So it's been challenging to intersect something interesting or something unique with something personal
mm,
when you're this limited. So
mm,
it's been just around the house, or like if I see an interesting sunset, or sometimes it's raining and it looks nice. So just maybe a form of therapy. It was meant to be for me at least a form of therapy before documentation. Some people are taking it, I mean in the group that I'm part of, some of them are taking it as documenting a point in history, a very strange point in history, a very upsetting point in history. But for me, it needs to be personal still,
mm,
because that's just the way I shoot. Everything is personal. So um, in that way, if I'm not really in a great mindset, I find it difficult to work on projects.
mm,
So with that, I just shoot whatever I feel. I haven't really shot with anything for a week now because I
mm-hmm,
just don't really feel it's a difficult way to work, but this is not a normal time for many of us. So I just like feel the need to be kind to myself first, and then work on my creativity next. Because if
Mm,
I'm not taking care of myself, I can't really be creative. I don't won't really have the right mindset for it.
mm,
So mostly it's just that. And since there are limitations when it comes to going outside here in Manila, I can only go out for supply runs, and it's very difficult to shoot when you're like lugging a lot of stuff. So I
mm,
haven't been shooting outdoors as much. I only tried it a few times, but then I've been, because police are everywhere. So I've been very careful about showing my camera, and like making it seem that I'm doing things other than supply runs. So when
mm.
it comes to photography, it's just me and the house at the moment. So it's been very difficult, very challenging for me to find anything to photograph that's not repetitive, that's still visually interesting at least, and still show something personal. So, but I'm nearly done with my role, so hopefully I can send it out to a lab even if we're still in lockdown and things. So yeah, nothing very interesting at the moment. But I try to make do with what I have.
Have you thought about doing any kind of like crazy telephoto type of work where like you're photographing like out of a window in the street?
I've done a lot of like street from the window types of shot, but there's not really, because the streets are very empty at the moment. So there's not really, it's very overdone, I think, if I still take a picture of an empty street. But
Mm,
at this point, everyone has done that, film or digital, smartphone or otherwise.
mm,
So it's more me just finding something that um is okay, that still shows, that still has the lockdown diary spirit, but isn't overdone. So can you get what I'm saying? It's a very limiting mindset, if you can consider it that. But it's just how I feel like working at the moment.
well, it's been kind of crazy here as well here in the states. I mean, you can probably only imagine like how our president is sort of like handling all of our situations here, COVID-19. So I'm an essential worker, so I have to go on location to work. And I know that my cousin lives in the Manila. She doesn't go on location, but she's also an essential worker too. So it's kind of strange. Yeah, it is kind of strange, and I'm sure it's very limiting as to how like you can go out and photograph. Like your normal routines was stripped away from you because of the virus.
Yeah.
Um, but at least you're trying your best to kind of create work and just doing the best you can to kind of and especially in such a big place like Manila and having it be empty. I mean, it must be kind of good for you guys for the fact that there's not a lot of pollution in the sky, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
In LA, I live near New York, so I live in Connecticut. I live in north or in the south of New York, and or north of New York rather. And yeah, I mean it's empty here in Connecticut, empty in New York, kind of empty in LA. All the pollution has been lifted out. And it would have been good for some photographs, but I can't go outside really. I can only go to work, and they're not really cracking down here in Connecticut, but it's kind of strange. Has the behavior of the Filipino community been pretty stressful since the lockdown?
In terms of people not really understanding the gravity of the situation and still going out, still exposing themselves, there's still a fair number of that here. But um, it's also about um, there's also a privilege checking happening here,
Mm,
because some people really can't afford to stay indoors and do nothing and just like wait out this virus to dissipate. they have to work. If they don't work, they don't eat. So it's there are the ones who are mostly spending a lot of time trying to make ends meet. They're also the ones who are outdoors trying to some of them I've seen are trying to ask for money, ask for donations out on the street. I don't want to call it begging.
Mm-hmm.
So they ask people to help them bit by bit because the government isn't at least the financial support hasn't gotten to them yet. Some of them haven't even gotten any food pack. So what else are you to do? You can't just um sit at home,
Mm-hmm.
wait, and then see your family not eating. So
Right.
you still have to do something and find something out there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the situation that people are pointing out now. Like you have to understand that some people can't stay at home because they don't if they don't look for something to eat, they're not gonna eat at all. So it's more that privilege checking and finally I think a lot of people are now understanding that by all means physical distancing is important
Mm-hmm.
because the cases are still we've been on lockdown for 2 months now, yeah, more than 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
So the cases are still rising.
Mm-hmm.
It we don't even call it flattening, we would call it plateauing. So it hardly changed. If you look at the graphs of the Philippine COVID-19 cases, it's just like hovering on the same level. So um it means that the physical distancing still isn't working because people are still there's still a lot of people who shouldn't be outside but they are and they're bringing infections and
Mm-hmm.
some of them may be asymptomatic and they don't know that they're spreading the virus. So people are starting to catch up on that. They are understanding that this is necessary, this is what we have to do, and some are very looking forward to working because it's their only source of income. So it's people are starting to adjust to the fact that the new normal will need to happen soon.
Mm-hmm.
All the precautions need to be put in place and they have to follow it strictly or else they will bring the virus to their families. So it's been a slow and steady pace of getting people to understand the gravity of the situation. There
Mm-hmm.
has been still a little bit of what do you call this? People who don't really follow the rules and the protocols, but
Mm-hmm.
that has becoming there's been less of that
Well, that's
lately.
good.
So yeah, maybe there I would say there's been a change in the attitudes.
Okay. Well, Joy, I I really appreciate you kind of coming into the podcast, and I actually need you to save me a couple of those zines because I'm actually going to purchase them on next paycheck. So just kind of wait for a
Oh, of
PayPal.
course.
Yeah, wait
Yeah.
for a PayPal request on that. Um, Before we go, is there anything that you want to kind of shout out before we finish this episode of the podcast?
It would be great if people can follow me on Instagram because I'm thinking of doing a print sale
Oh,
soon.
okay. Yeah, yeah. That
So
makes.
hopefully people can if they're interested in getting a print from me, they can follow me on Instagram for updates. And if people see whatever they like to have printed, I can probably get them printed after I figure out how to get stuff done with this lockdown. It's been very I had some print orders and I haven't had them done yet because of the lockdowns.
Wow.
So maybe once I figure out how to do it, I'll do a print run as soon as possible. And yeah, just I don't really have a lot to promote at the moment because I'm not doing a lot of things. But I would be it would be great if people can like get acquainted with my work through Instagram, of course, and my website. So
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll definitely be blowing you up on the gram. And if you guys that are listening in, that are tuning in, go ahead and check out The Caffeinated. That's the Instagram name that Joy runs. Film photography, incredible, very beautiful. And it's funny because you actually are followed by one of my friends. His name is Reed Hythcock. He's actually from he lives in North Carolina. He's actually a hardcore photographer. He photographs a lot of punk shows. So
ooh,
yeah, so we are into that. So here in in the States, most Filipinos that don't really, they're kind of weird like me, are into like a lot of hardcore punk and emo bands and such, and really love a lot of the classics, classic OPM, original Filipino
yeah,
music, Cambio and like Porokine Edgar and Eraserheads and
yeah.
such.
Raise your
So
hand. Yeah.
but there's so much more in there. I actually found a couple of bands, Tide Edit, um, Ourselves the Elves became
Oh
one of my
yeah,
favorites.
the new
Yeah,
ones.
yeah. If
And
you,
Shudad, if you haven't listened to Shudad yet, they're very good.
oh man, do you know the people from Ourselves the Elves?
I may have met them during a gig, but I don't really remember. I'm very bad at memorizing people's names,
Okay.
but I've gone to some shows with them in it, and yeah, they do great live.
I definitely want to see if I can connect with you guys, all of you guys in the Philippines. Maybe one of these
Sure.
days I can help contribute to some sort of like, exhibition one of these days, like a Xerox
Okay.
exhibition.
Yeah,
So,
or if you want to get a zine published here or distributed here, because I'm one of the co-founders of a zine collective here in Manila. It's called Zindicate. I'll I'll just share with you the link later. It's we go to a lot of zine fairs. It's becoming
okay.
a thing. So
Okay.
photo zines are slowly becoming mainstream, and I'm part of the community zine, a part of the zine community that hopes to get more of those photo zines out there, because it's mostly these days it's more illustration and text that are popular. So I'm trying to make people more familiar with photo zines. So if you go to some zine fairs here, most likely I'm there selling photo zines. So yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna hold that to you for sure. I actually have a zine ready. That hasn't. It's been ready since 4 years ago. So I'll
Wow.
definitely. Yeah,
About time.
yeah. I think it's about time I need to get connected to the Filipino community. I think I need to start blowing you guys up. All right, Joy. I really appreciate your time with me, and hopefully I can get to talk to you very soon. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
All
I'm
right.
here all the time.
All right, Joy. I'll
Thank
see you later.
you. See
Bye.
you and stay safe and healthy.
All right, take care.
Bye.
And that ends this episode of the Bueno Power Hour podcast. I would like to thank Joy for being part of this episode today. She's actually my first international interview that I've done, and it's been kind of nice to be able to sort of talk to somebody from outside to actually get their sort of input in the photography world and the art world, and who, of course, is in my like kind of wheelhouse and type of photography, my background and culture and such. So it's been cool, and I really appreciate her for actually coming in and having a conversation with me during these difficult times. Um, all right, guys. So if you like this episode, go and hit that like button, and if you want episodes like this more, go and hit that subscribe button. And as always, thank you for tuning in to the Bueno Power Hour podcast. Peace, guys. Stay safe, and I love you all.